I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and today I'm talking about Leigh Whannell, or more specifically, the Wolfman, or more specifically, the Invisible Man, or even more specifically, why audiences and myself seemed to love 2020's The Invisible Man. In fact, it was my favorite movie of that year, but we're kind of, shall we say, lukewarm to Wolfman. Again, my own opinion included. I'm a huge fan of Leigh Whannell. He co-created Saw and Insidious, two of my favorite horror franchises of all time. If he never did anything again, or only did movies I didn't like ever again, I still would have immense respect for him, and nothing can ever take away the fact that he was the writer on both Saw and Insidious. He created those characters, he acted in both of those movies, and he and James Wan again co-created two of my favorite franchises. Horror creators would kill to create one franchise like that, and he was part of two. So I give him the utmost credit and respect for that. I was intrigued when I heard he was going to make his directorial debut in 2015 with Insidious Chapter 3. James Wan was busy off doing Furious 7, and Whannell had written a lot. Again, he had written or co-written at least the first three Saw movies, the first two Insidious movies, along with Dead Silence, which James Wan also directed. And it was time for Whannell to kind of come into his own and direct something. And Insidious 3 was decent for a third installment prequel to an existing franchise. I will always hold the movie in a special place in my heart because it's the movie my wife and I watched on our very first date. So it holds very sentimental value to me. Objectively, though, yeah, it's not the best Insidious movie, but for a directorial debut, it's pretty decent. And then he kind of blew me away with Upgrade 3 years later, which was this really cool, like sci-fi action thriller that arguably was a better Venom movie than Venom, which came out the same year. All that being said, when he released The Invisible Man in 2020, there was there was anticipation. There was like, oh, this is his first time doing something really big. It's a big Universal IP. It's the biggest budget he's ever had. It's with Blumhouse. And again, the movie blew me away. Now, granted, I said it was my favorite movie of 2020. I know that that has to come with a big asterisk in that I know like the world shut down in 2020 and not that many movies came out then, but even if all the planned releases for 2020 had come out that year and not been delayed into like 2021 or 2022, I think it still would have been my favorite movie because it was amazing. It managed to take the story, the idea of the Invisible Man, modernize it, and actually make him scary again. Because Leigh Whannell realized I have to make the Invisible Man the villain and make, the victim that he's stalking into the protagonist. And how terrifying would that be? And how that works perfectly as a metaphor for an abusive relationship and a toxic spouse who, even when the person gets away from them, it's as if the Invisible Man represents the PTSD that lingers, and it's like, I don't see him here, but, like, I know he's there, and it did all that beautifully. So why then did Wolfman disappoint so much? Well, it ultimately comes down, I think, to 3 reasons. 3 reasons I'm gonna get into. The expectation, the baggage, and the execution. So let's kinda go one step at a time. The expectation. Following The Invisible Man, as I said, expectations were incredibly high. It was very well received. Its Rotten Tomatoes score is in the 90s. Again, it was my favorite movie, not just horror movie of 2020, it was my favorite movie of 2020. So, all that's going for it. And in doing so, he showed how he could bring back a universal beloved character and do something modern and interesting with it. So when his next project was announced as Wolfman, it's like, oh, well, he's going to do the same thing with Wolfman. And it's going to be just as transcending. It's going to be just as thought provoking. It's going to be just as interesting. And it's going to be just as unique and creative and a new spin. So, right off the bat, Wolfman is kind of coming in at a disadvantage because expectations are up here. When we saw Invisible Man, The expectations were only here. Upgrade was great, but it was great for like a low budget indie exploitation sci-fi movie. So when Invisible Man was as good as it raised the bar here. So anything less than this, even if Wolfman was here, which it's not, it's actually down here, but we'll get to that. Even if it was right here, it still wouldn't be good enough because we, the audience, already had that high expectation following what we saw and knew Leigh Whannell could do with a universal monster. So that didn't do the movie any favors, and regardless of how good it actually was, it was going to be very hard to have the same reception and gain the same respect as Invisible Man. Reason number 2, and this is going to be the long one, the baggage. Let me explain. When Invisible Man came out in 2020, we all, like, everyone knows Invisible Man. We all know that it's an old movie from Universal Monsters era. He randomly was involved in the war effort and like these propaganda action movies where he like infiltrated the Germany in Europe and all that fun stuff. And aside from that, and maybe his appearance in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is its own minefield, and the movie Hollow Man, there's not much else to do with the Invisible Man. He's a character whose name we recognize, but I guarantee you, I'd be willing to bet money that the vast majority of general audiences, I'm talking your casual movie fans, not your obsessed fans like myself and those of you watching the channel, but your casual movie fans, the vast majority of them, say under the age of like 50 or 60, probably has not seen any of those original Invisible Man movies. Maybe they've seen Hollow Man, but they haven't really seen those movies. And there is not a whole subgenre of Invisible Man movies in Hollywood and in horror in general. You know what there is an entire subgenre of? Werewolf movies. Yes, The Wolfman is the most famous, and technically it's not the first werewolf movie. Werewolves of London would like to have a word with you, but we've seen a lot of other werewolf movies since then. I know we had The Wolfman 1941 in 2010, and that was a more like direct remake of that original 1941 movie. But how many werewolf classics have we had since then? An American Werewolf in London, The Howling, werewolves that came out a few months ago, Teen Wolf. Like, there's so many other horror movies that either are about werewolves or have werewolves in them, so much so that you could even do a video of like the top 10, top 15, top 20 werewolf movies, and only one or two of them would even be called Wolfman. But they're still werewolf movies. So, going into 2025's Wolfman, I know you're waiting for me to get back to that movie, and I have. Getting back into that, Leigh Whannell is kind of walking into a trap here because with Invisible Man, he was free to do whatever he wanted with it, where he changed it from it's not like a potion he creates and pours on himself. It's a suit. He's a scientist, he's an inventor, and he invented this like optical suit that bends light around it, and it's more like high tech. The thing about werewolves is, and the thing about werewolf fans are, they are very particular about their lore. So when spoilers, you remove all elements of that. There's nothing about the full moon. There's nothing about silver. There's nothing about the pentagram. There's nothing about it really being a curse. It's turned more into a like a biological virus that he gets from his spoilers werewolf father. He does the same thing he did with Invisible Man, and on the surface, we should praise it because that's why we liked Invisible Man. He figured out a modern take on it. And again, Wolfman, not a bad movie, but badly received when people are going in expecting a werewolf movie. And neither of them actually even look like a wolf. They look more like a troll or almost like a hairy zombie. When you erase all the werewolf lore and mythos, what's left? So right away, fans are coming into it, diehard werewolf fans being like, this isn't really a werewolf movie. I'm not feeling it. And they didn't say the same thing about Invisible Man, but they could have. They could have said, well, this is nothing like the original Invisible Man movie. No, it's not, but you didn't care that it was nothing like the Invisible Man because most people haven't seen it and the general audiences are not familiar enough with it to care. His Wolfman movie honestly would have worked better not being called Wolfman and just being a random werewolf movie or just like a random like monster movie and don't even call him a wolf. Because when you call it Wolfman, again, there's an expectation that this is going to be the archetype of werewolf movies. Because while there's been a million of them, Wolfman kind of is still like the default one we think of and the one that we go to. And finally, reason number three, the execution. So here I am going to talk at length very much about the movie itself and where I think it failed. The Invisible Man worked because it was just a really compelling story. We felt for Cecilia. We saw how we jumped right in as she's like escaping her abusive boyfriend, and right away, we felt for her and we sympathized with her and we understood everything she was going through. We saw the terror that she lived in and we really rooted for her. With Wolfman, again, I really like the stuff at the beginning and how they set up like him and his father and how, spoilers, the whole movie is basically the realization of, you try so hard to not become the thing you swore you never would that you actually become it. That's a mouthful. Basically, you've become the very thing you swore to destroy. And it's tragic, and that's a really interesting theme, but everything else that happens in the movie, eh, again, I like what he does with the whole werewolf perception thing, but just in terms of plot and character, we feel like we barely get to know these people when everything starts happening. And then by the end, it sort of just ends because it doesn't know what else to do. It's ironically, it's a very simplified take on it, and it's almost too simplified. It feels like it should have done a little bit more. And when you're already not adhering to the werewolf lore, you can't say, "Oh, well, we had to forego all that in order to do this new interesting thing," if you're not really doing the new interesting thing enough to justify it. So that is why, in so many words, I believe that why The Invisible Man was such a hit and so well received by fans, and why I like it so much. But Wolfman, I'm just kind of like, eh. And again, a lot of it is not even Wolfman's fault. But if it was a better, stronger movie and had more, I think, going for it, it would have been easier to overlook those other things. Oh, yeah, I know it abandons the werewolf lore, but it's doing these really cool things. I don't think it does enough of that to justify departing from that. But hey, this is just my rant. These are just my thoughts. I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments. What did you think of Invisible Man and Wolfman? Did you like the one a lot more than the other? Do you agree with me that this is why, you know, people like the first and not the next one? Do you have other reasons you think I missed as to why people liked Invisible Man and not Wolfman? I would love to know them. Please, write a comment. Tell me I'm wrong. It's YouTube. It's what we do here. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up being stalked by either an invisible man or a wolf man that looks nothing like a wolf, a man, or a werewolf. And as always, every day is Halloween.